Part 1. Initial experience having a blind student in your class.
I'm Marion Massa. I teach at a large suburban school outside the Chicago area. It has about 3,200 students, a little bit more than that. Our students are multicultural. We have a good minority population. We also have both the mentally and physically handicapped students. Our building has 3 floors to it, quite large. I've been teaching here in the district for 26 years. I have a math major, so I've been teaching math all those years, anywhere from basic math all the way up to college algebra and trigonometry, which is basically just a step away from calculus. This is the first time I've actually dealt with a blind student. Before that, I've done physically handicapped, basically kids in wheelchairs or whatever. So this is the first time that it's been more of a challenge with the physically handicapped. You make adaptations, but they basically can see and know what you're talking about. With the blind student, I first found out I was getting ready to pack up and go home for the summer. It was the very last day of school. And somebody walked in the room and said she was the blind itinerant. And she came over to me and she asked me who I was. And I said, yes, but I think you have the wrong teacher. And she said, no, I think not. And I said, well, I don't have him in class next year. At least he's not in my schedule. And she says, oh, we've made a change. He'll be in your class next year. And I said, oh. And she promptly left. And I thought, okay, this is something wrong here because this is not supposed to be happening. He would be in my geometry class. I was on a committee for over a year to adopt a brand new geometry book. So it would be the first time through, and knowing that another teacher had dealt with the blind student in algebra, you have to have all your tests and quizzes, everything, at least 2 weeks ahead of time. And I'm thinking, not with a new book, that's not going to happen, and this is not happening to me. And it's kind of like, well, we'll deal with it when September comes around. Well, all summer long, though, I stewed about it, and how am I going to get all this done, and how is that going to work? And yes, there are 32 kids in my class, along with him. And brand new book, and not quite sure, knowing where you're going with the book. Came back in the fall. I'm like, sure enough, he's still in my class. I'm like, now why? I knew he was supposed to be in somebody else's class, and they go, well, he was moved to your class because you have more teaching experience, and probably it would just be a better situation. So I never saw the blind itinerant again until like maybe a week into school. Well, my student showed up. Then I was informed that I didn't really know how the textbook came. I just assumed it was one big book. Much to my surprise, you get many different books. There's only a couple pages to each book. Well, we really have no place to store it, so then I found out it was not the newer version of the book either. It was an old edition. So I had not planned on trying to look at the old edition and the new edition and seeing what differences there were. So about the 3rd day, when something wasn't matching up in his book and my book, and I cannot read Braille, it became very frustrating right away as to, okay, this is going to be a problem. So I had him start reading things to me, and I'm not sure like he was telling me the truth. I mean, I can't see it, and I'm not sure that he's really reading it right either. So am I supposed to? And I go, no, that can't be right. And he goes, yes, it is. And I go, you're not on page so-and-so. And he goes, yes, I am. So finally found the blind itinerant. I said, there's something wrong here because I can't read that book, and I don't think he's on the right pages. And she goes, oh, yes, they only come with maybe 10 pages of a regular textbook in Braille. And, oh, by the way, we have a different edition. She goes, now, do you have the old edition so I can at least compare his answers to what and help him? And I'm like, well, I'll try to search one out because all we have is the new edition. So basically most things matched, whatever. And I really didn't worry that much about it because he was very capable of trying to adjust. But at the beginning, he didn't tell me everything that was really wrong, like there's no picture here when there was a picture in our book that went with it. So he was very patient. I did get an aide for him through our special services about 2 weeks into the year. I did have the first week or so, or the first 2 weeks of whatever I was giving them as a handout or a quiz or whatever for her to Braille. And it took her a long time to do it. I'm not quite sure why. I'm like, well, why isn't she getting all that stuff back to me? I have to have it. Why wasn't I getting it back? Well, we didn't hit it off, me and the itinerant, right away. And then she came up and she goes, you know, this is taking a long time to Braille. I'm going to need it sooner. And I go, I don't understand what the problem is. She goes, well, all the diagrams she uses a glue gun to make. Well, since geometry is so visual, almost every single problem has a diagram with it, and I did not understand, and it was a lack of communication. So one of the things that we were lacking at the very beginning is our communication. I think she just assumed I knew what goes on with a blind student and whatever. I had no training whatsoever, really did not want to do this. Nobody told me what was going to happen, and I'm assuming he's in a regular class. He's supposed to be doing all the work all the other students is. He is not on a modified grade. So yes, I expect all this. Well, about 2 weeks into school, one of the people out of special education stopped me in the hall and says, well, by the way, how is so-and-so doing? And I said, well, I haven't seen a stitch of homework yet. I'm having a hard time. I have no grades for him. And she looked at me and she thought that was odd. But I thought it was odd because I didn't think she was working with him either. So she relays that to the blind itinerant. Well, I have a phone call immediately. Well, that means he'll have to ink it. And I'm thinking, well, fine, ink it. What's the problem here? So not knowing what ink it meant, I was like, okay, I don't understand, you know. So I saw the student in class next day. I said, I guess you're going to have to ink it. And he goes, yeah, she told me I'm going to have to ink it. And I'm like, well, okay. I just figured he typed it into something and it printed it out. I don't know what ink it means. So the next day he comes and he's got half of it out. And I'm like, okay, where's the rest of it? Well, we didn't have time to ink the rest of it. I'm like, I still don't get this. So the next day comes, he doesn't have it done again. And I'm like, okay, so I better say something. So I called her up and I said, you know, I'm still not getting any homework and I don't understand. She goes, well, you know, it's really hard when he goes home for him to do all his homework and then his parents to write it out. I go, that's what ink it means? She goes, yes. So I think my expectations were totally different. I just assumed he did the problems and then he typed them in and somehow it printed it out or something from some computer someplace. So communication is very important right away, and I think a little bit of training for the teacher would help a lot. I was basing some of it off the teacher that worked with the student the year before, and she wasn't very informative. Just get this done 2 weeks ahead of time, get it to the blind itinerant, she'll get it back to you. And I'm like, okay. And didn't explain to me maybe some procedures that they had worked out or whatever. So I was kind of going into it blindly because I really didn't know what all this terminology meant or what I should be expecting from the student. He was grading his own papers and stuff, which was fine because obviously nobody else could grade them, but I could not give feedback as if he was understanding it or not. He could answer in class. If I asked him what was the answer to 32, he could give me an answer, which was great, but did he do all the rest of the problems? And in a basic sophomore geometry class, I give 3 points a day for homework, so he was getting all zeros in my book because I wasn't seeing any homework. So there was a problem there. Before I ever knew that I was going to have John in class or the blind student in class or that there was a blind itinerant or anything, you just teach in your classroom and you go on because you have 150 students and you know there are some special ed students in there and you deal with special ed services and you get frustrated with them because you know they didn't return the test or the kid has to go there to make the test and so on. So you already have a bad feeling about people that special ed students that you have to deal with. The special ed teachers go track them down. They didn't return the test, whatever. One day I was sitting in the math office and teacher behind me had the blind student in algebra. And I'm like, glad that's not me. Not going to be me. And she got up from her desk and we have mail slots in the back and she went and she picked up some mail out of her mailbox, came back to her desk and kind of was cussing out about everything. And she goes, that blind itinerant, she did it again. She put that Braille test in my box. How does she think I'm going to grade that? And she was going on and on, quite furious, whatever. And I'm thinking, man, am I glad that's not going to be, isn't me, and still not going to be me. He's not going to take my class next year. There's no way he can be in regular geometry. And I was just happy as a thing and glad it wasn't me, somebody else's problem. So but I thought about it and I'm thinking, that has to be really frustrating because what do you do with the Braille test? And I'm like, and then I'm thinking, and then I said, well, I did talk to her later. And I said, well, what do you do with those things or whatever? And she goes, well, they go to, the blind itinerant and she prints it out for me. And so I said, oh, so I'm thinking, well, that's got to be a pain in the neck because now you got to wait to get the kid's test. That means you're going to have to grade it separately than you grade the rest. And I always have mine graded the next day and hand him back and go over it. So that means he wouldn't be doing that because it would take too long to get that back. So, I'm like, yes, it's not me, whatever. And then when I got the word that it would be me, I'm like, oh, that's not going to happen. And so to understand the point further, the test came from somebody in special services that the student was working with, and they put it back in her box for the blind itinerant to get it. But again, we're on a communication thing where we really don't know where the test came from, but the teacher made the assumption that the blind itinerant put it in there, and that probably really didn't happen, because why would she do that? She knew she had to print it out. One way I avoided that problem is we did have somebody write for the blind student when he was in my class, and that saved him a lot of time, him frustration from typing it into the Brailleite and then getting it all printed out again, immense amount of time, so he could just say the answers A and so on. And then the second year I dealt with the blind student, the blind itinerant didn't want him doing that. She did want him writing it out himself. So to get more life skills for himself, because nobody's going to be sitting there writing for him all the time. So there was some contradiction on that point. I could see her point. I saw my point. It's easy. It's done. I can grade it. Made life easier for me. He preferred having somebody else write it for him too, because it saved some time, but he did learn things by that. So part of the thing is communication, but I didn't pick up on that, what she was talking about with the test and everything until I was in the situation. So if I had known some of that stuff before I actually walked into that classroom that very first day, it probably would have helped me cut down the anxiety level when you're first going in there. It's like, what am I going to do with this kid? What am I going to do? And I think at the beginning it's like, this is a regular student. He's going to have to do it like everybody else does it, and then you just find out it doesn't work. If somebody would have sat down and said, okay, this is how he takes tests. Somebody writes for him, somebody doesn't write for him. Somebody reads him the test, or does he read it all himself? The blind itinerant did braille a few things incorrectly. Some of that could have been my fault too, because if I miswrote something on the test, I can easily make that correction in my classroom. Kids, hey, just change that to a 5. Not easy for him, because he has to go find where the problem is. He then has to, how does he change that number? He doesn't. So I had to, giving a test, when he took it in class, which 99% of the time he did, we had him take it outside of class a few times when somebody had to do a lot of reading to him. Then it was distracting to the other students. He did type on his Brailleite, which did make some noise. The kids had no problem dealing with it. And I asked the kids when I put them there, I said, if it's a problem, we'll move you. And nobody ever complained, so they all adapted that way. So part of the problem was, where is he going? Where is he going to do this? How is he going to do this? How is he going to do his homework? How do I get his homework back? I don't collect homework. I walk around and check it every day. So my next question is if he had to turn it in, what would he be turning in? That issue I didn't come to, but I'm sure other teachers would have that issue. That was a problem. Not for me, but I'm sure it's going to be for other people. So if somebody could just sit down and say, this is the way I work with this student. Every student's not going to be the same, obviously, but the majority, it's going to be basically the same thing. How do you do this? How do you do a fire drill? Does he go out with the rest of the students? Does he not? Does he need somebody to help him? Do you want him to go on his own? Can he work with other students, or should he have an aide and just work with the aide? Things like that, because I was afraid, okay, am I putting pressure on the kid that's working with him now? He's got to rely on this other kid to read him the problems. And this other kid's hoping he's going to get help from him, but maybe he can't because they're not on the same problem, because he has to go through all his reading first, where the other kid's just looking at the picture. There's some problems that way. How do I do that? Maybe something that helped me too was possibly a magazine or something in Braille about just the blind in general. What needs do they have? What do they have available to them? How do they function every day? I don't know how he gets around town and stuff. That was one frustrating thing to me. I'm assuming he's down there every period, 7th period, that first year, and I could just walk down and get some help from him, or give him some help, or talk to the blind itinerant. I'd come down many times if the door was locked. I'm like, well, where did they go? Well, every Wednesday he did his walk around town, whatever else. I didn't know that. I'm like, well, man, I was supposed to come down here. Nobody's here. I'm wasting my time. Maybe a little that I don't know his other needs. And I think, too, is he was an above-average student, so he's taking a full class load, not like a lot of our other special ed students or low-level students that take maybe only 4 or 5 classes. He's taking a load of 6 classes, plus his free time is taken up. I actually went down one time, and they're having ice cream. Like, I didn't get invited to this party. He's learning how to cook. He's learning how to clean off the table, things like that. I was not aware of that's what he's doing during that time. I'm thinking you should be doing your math, not realizing he's got all these other things to do. That's one, and he happened to be a wrestler, so in the morning before wrestling season started, he's lifting weights. After school, when season starts, he's wrestling. He doesn't have time for me. And I'm thinking, man, he should be giving all this time up. I'm giving this time up. Where is he? So I don't know, what else he's doing. And I'm thinking, one day I walked in. There was a room that the itinerant has with all her stuff in it. And I walked in, and science teacher's there. And I'm thinking, and he's working on biology. And I'm like, wait a minute. What happened to his math? And I thought I'm the only one that's, that he has to worry about. And he really has to worry about all his classes and his workload. And as a classroom teacher, you're not even thinking about his class load and what actually he has to do every single day. And when I asked him to have his homework and they told me he had to ink it, later on I understood, well, first of all, what ink it meant, and then I understood what it was such a problem with it, because he had all this other stuff to do. So if he got home by 6 o'clock at night and first started getting anything done, he had homework from 5 classes. Okay, one thing that as the classroom teacher, what I would suggest, that when you find out the very last day of school that you are getting a blind student the following year, your reaction probably is not going to change. I don't care what happens. You're probably going to be, oh no, this is not happening to me, and no, I'm not going to do this. You have to understand that the laws allow those students to be in class. You have to accept those laws. And I think those laws, as more and more students come into the classroom that have different situations, probably teachers are going to be more accessible or whatever, or accept that just a little bit better. You really need to right away start thinking about how to find out more about the student, number one. What services are available for that student? What contacts do you have with people to help you? Who am I dealing with? Am I dealing with people in my special services? Am I dealing with just a blind itinerant? Who's going to help me get through this? Don't think you can get through it yourself. It's not going to happen. So you do have to probably make some contacts. The problem was I had 3 months to think about it. And it was just like, you went from anger, now this is not going to happen, to okay, let me see what I can do. I'm going to be the best teacher in the world for this kid. I'm going to go out and get all this, buy all these figures and everything else. And then what do I do with it, You have to do a little bit of research on your own, okay? Just on blind, I would just say blind in general. What is their day like? What do they do? Or actually, we've done it here. Actually, we've had physically handicapped students. So many years ago, we used to make the teachers be in the wheelchairs for the day. How hard is that, okay? And then we realize what their life is like. Maybe you need to try to be blind for a while. What is that like, And then try to think about how you're going to, if you were the learner, how were you going to learn this without seeing it? So that also affected how I made my lesson plans after a while too, because I'm thinking, okay, if I can't see that, what am I going to do? And when you always, somebody would say, how things going on? I say, teaching a blind kid geometry just is, and they're like, blind kid is taking geometry? You're like, how in the world do you do that? Well, so the suggestions then were, you have to make a lot of contacts on your own, or really research what's available, and then slowly try to accumulate some knowledge about what's available, what you can do. Being hit all at one time with things isn't helpful either, because if I get this big manual, I'm not going to read it. I need to talk to people. Just reading things wasn't helping me either. So maybe some reading material might help. A list of websites was helpful. Maybe not just academic websites, but what do they do during their lives? Where do they go? How do they function? How do they go to the bank? How do they do this? I mean, that might have helped me a little bit too. I don't know, but maybe understand them a little bit better. So maybe if I had some understanding of their situation, it might have helped me a little bit better in those first couple of weeks. How can I help them their first couple of days in my classroom? Not just throw this at them and, hey, that's too bad. So you have to understand too, is you have to make adaptations to them, and they're new to you, but you're new to them too, and you have to understand that they're not going to come in and know everything either, and they're going to be leery of you. How are you going to react to them? What are you going to do? And so on. So you have to find out a little bit about the student itself. You know, I'm just thinking, okay, this algebra teacher screaming and yelling about, you know, blind student, his test and everything else. I'm thinking, what kind of kid is this? And everybody else, you know, a couple other teachers, oh yeah, he's a great kid. Okay, is he bad? Is he good? Is he in between? I don't know. Maybe you need to find out a little bit more background about the kid. All I knew is he went here. I didn't know anything else. So I needed to know more about his background. And then actually his second year here, his brother was here. So that helped out a little bit. If he missed class, his brother could come and, you know, do things. Maybe parent contact. I never saw the parents the entire year. Did not come to parent conference night, did not come to open house. Anything I dealt with, I went through the blind itinerant, she would call home. I finally met the parents at the end of the year at the staffing. And all they said to me was, thank you for everything, and that was it. And I'm thinking, lady, if you only knew the hours I put in with this child of yours. So it was frustrating that way. So I think more parent contact. I was leaving it up to the itinerant to deal with it. She dealt with the family for how long? She knows the family. Why should I get involved? So I just left it there. So maybe some contact with the parents right away. Does the kid have other problems? Does the kid need this? How does he react? They would know that more than the blind itinerant would. How does he go with setbacks? You know what I'm saying? What goes on at home? Do you have a routine he does at home that takes away from his homework time? You know, he did play softball, you know, and he's explaining how to do that. Well, here he's going away on weekends and doing that. Okay, that's taking away from my class, you know, what he's doing in my class. I needed to understand that. So there's a lot of background information you need to get. Try to locate other people that have taught blind students. It doesn't necessarily mean to do, if he's in a high school situation, doesn't mean you have to talk to high school teachers. Just talk to anybody just to get some feel on what to do. Now, when I talked to the person that had him for algebra, not very informative. So I was basing some information, you know, some of my summaries off of what she was saying, which wasn't really a good, I needed more than one person. So I probably should have went and talked to the rest of his teachers. If he's a freshman, go back to junior high and say, okay, what was gone on here? How did you deal with math here? Did they have a calculator? How did he do that? You know, I don't know when he came to class. What's a Braille light? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what equipment he comes with, what he has, what he needs. He needed space. He needed a bigger desk than what we had. You know, nobody told me that. You know, those are things you have to find out beforehand. Otherwise, you are scrambling and trying to teach the rest of your classes, and you will go crazy for a while. And it got to a point where I don't want that kid anymore, move him to somebody else's class, I'm not doing this. So it's just that whole big thing at the very beginning that would help out. But then you got to continue on. As the year goes along, you need to learn different things. How else could I do this? What other services are available to me? What information, what can I get from other websites, or can I get things free? You know, other people's lesson plans, how did they do this? You know, is there a internet site that I could communicate with somebody, you know, not just a chat room. People make up things there. I need actually somebody that, you know, not just chatting with me and said, oh yeah, whatever. I need actual places to, you know, whatever. Is there a college nearby I could call and just say, what do I do in this situation or whatever. I needed to feel more relaxed with things too, or, you know, I'm really having a problem. Somebody I could go to and say, what could I do with this situation? And obviously it didn't really happen here. The administration didn't know anything, counselors didn't know anything. So that would be, make my life a whole lot easier, plus I probably could have made his life a whole lot easier, and the whole thing would have worked better. Just a little bit more information, and what are their rigors of the day, or what makes it difficult for them being able to see all the time. I'm like, well, why can't he just do that? I mean, what's the problem here? Or he should be able to do that, and he can't do that. Why? So maybe just some characteristics, just in general. Even a pamphlet or anything probably would have helped, just to, so you feel relaxed going in or whatever. And then the explanation, you're going to have to make some adjustments. You're going to have to make some contact with every day, talk to the kid. Don't just let him sit there, find out what's going on with him. From the itinerant's viewpoint, I think it would be a great idea if they just put, not like a little manual almost. Like, these are the basic things that they do. They have to do mobility, they have to do this. You expect them to go out with the fire everybody else in the fire thing. Ink it means to write out your homework on a sheet of paper. What was available? I'm assuming he typed everything in and it printed it right out that I could read it. No, that didn't happen. Assumption I made wasn't true. What do I get from you? I have to give you this how much ahead of time? When should I expect to get it back? What forms do they need to be in to give you? Is there a way I can, now with the computer, she did give me a disk that didn't work, I mean a program that really didn't work, but I'm sure now maybe different programs out. How do I do that? You give it to me and I give it back to you? Just, some basic things that between you and me, what happens, maybe not including the kid. When are you here? Where are you available? Are you available all the time? Can I go to somebody else if you're not available, or wherever resources are available? Maybe if I just had that to read through during the summer, even, take it home, and then I've got a question on this, question on that, question on this, and then I could come back and say, could we sit down and talk about this? So some basic things like this. What do you do? What is your job with this child? I did not realize that she did the mobility or she did the cooking with him and stuff. I didn't realize that that's, I thought she came in, brailled, and left every day. I didn't know what she did. I'm not there. I don't see. Maybe things that a suggestion as to where I could go on, different places of information. If she couldn't answer it, or in my specific mathematics or something like that. Those were helpful ideas to come up with. So that would have helped. Maybe a couple of sessions actually before that student was in my classroom with her, that she had of me, like, how do I teach? What do I expect if it's a regular classroom? If I'm doing an altered classroom, what else would, how are we altering it? Can you help me make a lesson plan or come up with a plan of how I could teach him better? So what was her background? She didn't have any background. She did have 2 student teachers while I was working with her. One had a great math background and was terrific with the kid. The other one wasn't, so that was fine. But it took a lot off of me, because then now I could rely on the student teacher to help him. So what is your background? What is your major area besides just, blind itinerant? To me, that was type my braille, give it back to me, hello, goodbye. I mean, I had no idea. So what is your function? What do you expect from me besides just stuff, braille it, get it back, put it in my mailbox? So that was some things that would have helped me, and communication probably would have been a whole lot better. We would have kicked it off a whole lot better than just being totally frustrated at each other. And she didn't know what geometry was. She had an idea, but nowhere knew the volume of paper she would be typing or diagrams she would be making. And so if I had been able to maybe sit down with her ahead of time and give her, this is my first test. How do you do that? She might have just said, hey, that's going to be a lot of work. Is there some way else we can do these diagrams or something? So maybe, and then that would have made it easier. I mean, we got to the 4th test and we're pulling each other's hair out because we're spending hours on top of hours, when even after the 1st test we could have just said, this is going to be too much. Let's do it a different way. Or could I give it to her in a different form that would make it easier for her? So there's things on my part, or our part as teachers, that we need to do. But you need to know that. You need to know to go out and do this. And then the itinerant probably could have much more, even the 2 that came when she went on maternity leave, I never even saw them. I don't even know what they look like, nothing. But I just knew, give them my stuff, braille it, get it back. I knew that was going to happen. What else happened? I didn't know. And I don't think the student knew either what he was supposed to do from day to day. So it was a challenge, but I'd been working with it long enough. It didn't bother me anymore, but obviously other teachers were very much bothered by it. So those are some things that, from both sides, that could be worked on, or at least if I knew all that stuff and they knew my side of it. A classroom teacher, never working with a blind student. Now I would know different things to do, but never working with it, I needed something. The itinerant also found a program that science was using that I could type my tests, save it on the disk, and through that program give her the disk, and she should be able to run it off, and it would braille it, and she wouldn't have to do all that. We tried it on my home computer because that's where all my math symbols are and everything else. We don't have those loaded on the school system at that point. And it was knocking me off the internet and not letting me log on, and we had several other problems with it. So we had to give up that idea too. So I think when I went into it too, I'm thinking we have all this modern technology, it should be easy to do this. And I would think that they had all this stuff, and it's not. So I can feel their pain sometimes when they struggle with, you know. And we had some interesting conversations in class too, like how do you know what, I rent out calculators, so if they didn't have a calculator, it was 50 cents for a graphing calculator. So if they were giving me $1, I said, well, you know, if you gave me $1, or if you gave me $5, how do you know I gave you the right change back? Or, you know, a $10 bill and I owed you, you know, whatever. How do you know I'm not giving you just singles and didn't get a 5 back? And so it's interesting how he told us different things that is becoming modern technology or different ways to see things. The class learned a little bit too, because then I had this conversation to include him to say, okay, how do you do this? You know, or how can we help you to make it better or whatever. So, but it took me a while to do that, to open up and let the class, you know, because I was afraid that they would make fun or ask questions that were inappropriate, and then what do you do? And so whatever. So it came out okay. I mean, but you know, there's some definitely lessons learned, and a lot of it was communication. A lot of it's knowing what's out there available for you to use in your classroom. I tried to go to, I had been given some sites that they had things on for the blind and so on, and I tried some of those and stuff, but some of them weren't actually as informative as I hoped, or as a classroom teacher, it's a lot of time. And that was the #1 thing. And I would advocate for, if you're going to have a student like that in class, that you not go to your duty, or somehow built in, you have time to meet with that itinerant either on a weekly basis or almost every day. In some cases, I was meeting with her every single day. And having extra time to meet with the blind student to help them that you cannot do in class. Or give them alternates, like he couldn't do the projects we would do, because a lot of them would be graphing or something like that, or they had to go onto the internet. Now granted, he could do some of it, so we would downsize some of his projects, even in the advanced class, which was okay with me. I didn't have a problem with that, but I didn't feel he got out of it as much as he could have gotten out of it. You need to get your administration involved and let them know really how much time, because I really don't think they have a clue at all, or even the counselor. She just, when we had to have a meeting to change his grade from a regular class grade to an altered grade. And she just sat there and she goes, well, I don't see what the problem is. And I'm like, well, maybe you could come in and sit in and observe or something, but that never happened. I mean, no contact, whatever. So I basically dealt with the itinerant then. The guidance counselor did not help. It was just like, well, whatever you say, fine. Just sign these papers. And I'm like, well, this makes a huge difference if he gets a regular grade and an altered grade. You know, and she goes, well, he's going to get in any college he wants. He's blind. He's getting a B average. And I'm like, okay, I really don't think that's the point here. But if that's the way you do it, okay. You know, so you get a lot of different viewpoints, and unless they're really involved, and they don't understand, and so you do have to get them involved. And so my department head didn't understand it either until every day she walked past my class in the morning at 7:20 and saw this kid sitting there, and then she realized how much time of the day it was taking. You know, and I just said, you know, I just can't do it all anymore, so something's going to happen some way. So she was supportive in that, but I still don't think she even understood. And she needed to sit in the classroom and didn't do that either. So she chose a different period to observe me, and I'm like, that probably would have been the best thing in the world for her to see. But